You are listening to audiobooks at Feel Good Cultivation audio channel. Up next is Demon Emperor Episode High. Chapter Kong. Over 1,000 men scoured the mountain, and soon they located the tomb the old farmer had mentioned. Nguyen Ho trod upon the ground, which was carpeted with dry leaves. Amidst them, inked black pine cones occasionally peeked through, easily mistaken for animal droppings at first glance. Before him lay a large tomb, its top covered with a mound of dry grass, resembling disheveled long hair, appearing even more eerie and terrifying amidst the forest. But the true grand tomb lay deep underground, difficult for the naked eye to perceive. A scout came to report. "This is the place." Nguyen Ho nodded lightly. "Make the arrangements." Yuchi Chongwu received the order. "Yes." Yuchi Chongwu turned and immediately issued commands, ordering each squad to secure the vital paths up and down the mountain. Because this donkey demon was different from ordinary people, he even had men guard places inaccessible to humans, setting up layers upon layers of blockades. At the same time, he had crossbowmen lie in ambush in front of the tomb and deployed spear and shield formations on both flanks of the forest to prevent the donkey demon from slipping in from either side. To deal with such a demon, it felt as if the smoke and fire of a battlefield filled the air. Yuchi Chongwu arranged his forces according to the terrain, quietly waiting for nightfall. It was said that this demon usually rested during the day and became active at night, so it would likely emerge then. But soon, Yuchi Chongwu returned, hurriedly approaching Nguyen Ho. "Your Majesty, I feel something is not right." Nguyen Ho immediately looked at him and asked, "What feels not right? Speak plainly." Yuchi Chongwu: "I just discovered a tomb guarding stone tablet nearby. This place might be the lair of the former dynasty's donkey army, and also their burial ground." Nguyen Ho frowned. "What donkey army?" Yuchi Chongwu: "Your Majesty may not know, but 100 years ago, there was a group of rebels known by the world as the Donkey Army. It is said these people were skilled in evil sorcery. Folk tales claim they could turn people into donkeys to serve as mounts. And these donkeys, created by dark arts, not only possessed endurance far beyond normal but could also understand human speech, making them exceedingly sinister. This donkey army relied on that art to wreak havoc in a region, eventually being annihilated by the imperial court and driven into the western lands, where they vanished without a trace." Hearing Yuchi Chongwu's words, Nguyen Ho immediately thought of the malevolent spirit in the temple. It seemed to have the appearance of a military general, and the distance between the two places was not far. Could it be related to this donkey army? Nguyen Ho: "What do you mean by not right? Are you referring to the origin and identity of this donkey demon?" Yuchi Chongwu: "Precisely. The donkey demon itself is not terrifying, but this donkey army caused considerable disaster in the past. The methods and evil sorcery these people possessed were not ordinary, to be able to wreak such havoc. They were certainly not comparable to common demonic beings. Moreover, although these people were eventually wiped out by the imperial court, their remnants disappeared without a trace after entering the western lands, which is truly too strange." Nguyen Ho understood. "You feel that these people dying here might involve some other scheme?" Yuchi Chongwu nodded. "Your Majesty is wise. I just inquired about this demonic affair in the surroundings and heard something." Nguyen Ho said nothing, waiting for Yuchi Chongwu to finish. Yuchi Chongwu said, "It is said that someone heard the movement of ghost soldiers passing by. If an ordinary person heard about ghost soldiers, they would mostly dismiss it as nonsense. Difficult to believe, but Nguyen Ho himself had an extraordinary background, having encountered malevolent spirits and even deities in murals. At this moment, learning of the existence of ghost soldiers, he did not doubt it." Nguyen Ho glanced at the sky. At this moment, the sun was blazing overhead. "In that case, we cannot wait for nightfall. This world had its own rules. Ordinary malevolent spirits and resentful souls could only emerge at night. Even the Gui-eating tiger had to wait until nightfall to act, because only then could the souls of the dead condense into form and roam the mortal realm." Yuchi Chongwu led his men through the stone tomb passage. Who Whew! The men at the front held torches. It was very quiet in the tomb passage, so everyone's breathing sounded unusually clear. This underground tomb certainly couldn't be called an imperial mausoleum, but it was at least constructed to the standards of a prince or marquis. On the stone walls on both sides of the tomb passage were carved some gloomy and terrifying images. One depicted a person with their throat slit, placed on a stone altar for bloodletting. Another showed a black donkey tied to a wooden post. And around each painting, there were many figures wearing vu-hitch masks, coldly observing the person on the stone altar and the donkey on the wooden post. It seemed that whether it was a donkey or a human, in their eyes, there was no difference. Looking at these carvings, it became clear that the donkey army did not turn people into donkeys. At least, not in the way ordinary people imagined. They extracted the entire lifeblood of a human and infused it into the body of a donkey. Those vu-hitch seemed to believe that a part of the soul was contained within another's lifeblood, and this method could transfer a person's soul into a donkey body. And after performing this evil sorcery, these donkeys could grow to the size of horses, possessed incredible endurance, and were easily controlled by people. However, Yuchi Chongwu discerned a few things. This donkey army indeed originated from the western lands. No wonder they returned west when they met their demise. And looking to the other side, there were images of the donkey army conquering various regions. In the paintings, the donkey army looked majestic and formidable, while their enemies were all terrified out of their wits. Entering the main burial chamber from the tomb passage, the space immediately widened. Clack! At this moment, someone stepped on something underfoot, producing a crisp sound. Yuchi Chongwu looked down at the ground. Bring the torch over. The torch was lowered, revealing scattered white skeletons. Around these white skeletons, quite a bit of women's clothing was strewn about. Some made of brocade and silk, others merely coarse cloth. The clothes did not look too old, but there was no flesh or blood on these remains. A moment's thought sent a shiver down one's spine. Go! Yuchi Chongwu immediately tightened his grip on the long saber in his hand and walked deeper inside. As they ventured deeper into the tomb, strange sounds began to emanate. Yuchi Chongwu immediately raised his hand, signaling everyone to slow down. As everyone drew nearer, the sound grew closer, and the soldiers following Yuchi Chongwu felt their palms begin to sweat. Passing a pillar, Yuchi Chongwu suddenly sensed something and swung his torch towards a dark corner. Who's there? The firelight illuminated the dark corner, and everyone's pupils instantly dilated. They saw, in the hidden corner behind the layers of pillars in this tomb, a demonic creature covered in black fur stood erect on two legs. Its two large hooves rested on the ground, strong enough to shatter stone. And precisely because it stood upright, the creature's form appeared even taller, even more terrifying. Yuchi Chongwu looked closely and discovered that the creature's mouth was biting a woman. Her entire head was stuffed into its mouth, leaving only her naked, struggling body below. The sound just now was the faint murmurings of that person on the verge of death. In an instant, Yuchi Chongwu roared, "Fiend, prepare to die!" The firelight, along with Yuchi Chongwu's roar, finally startled the demonic beast. The beast tilted its head. Its massive donkey head looked down from a height of 2 meters. Standing upright, its body was entirely black, but its donkey head was white, making it resemble a giant, powerful warrior wearing a donkey mask at first glance. Then, it bared its stark white teeth, revealing an inhuman grin, and the woman bitten in its mouth immediately fell. Ah! Hiss! This scene was truly too horrifying, momentarily stunning the soldiers who had charged in with Yuchi Chongwu, leaving only Yuchi Chongwu himself to press forward. Yuchi Chongwu swung his saber and slashed. The donkey demon had already tossed the woman aside and kicked out with one hoof at the blade. Yuchi Chongwu was sent flying backward, but the donkey demon also let out a kanjiao, apparently not expecting Yuchi Chongwu's strength and swordsmanship to far exceed its estimations. After all, Yuchi Chongwu was someone who could draw a 5-picule bow. No second person like him could be found in the entire Imperial Guard. Then, The demonic creature transformed into a black shadow and dashed out. Yuchi Chongwu scrambled up and, without pausing, shouted, "Chase!" The black shadow, limping, quickly fled, followed closely by figures holding torches. Just as the donkey demon burst out of the tomb entrance, it saw countless crossbows aimed at it. The leader was none other than Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho had long been waiting with his bow. Hearing the commotion, he had ordered his men to prepare, and he himself had nocked an arrow. Seeing the donkey demon appear, he fired instantly. Swoosh! And as Nguyen Ho's arrow flew, like a signal, the surrounding men prepared to shoot in unison. But at this moment, the donkey let out a bizarre cry. In an instant, most of those who heard this bizarre cry felt as if their souls had been drained. Standing stunned on the spot, only a few could maintain their senses and, following Nguyen Ho, shot their arrows, but even so, countless arrows still flew out simultaneously, 7 or 8 of them striking the donkey body at the same time, including Nguyen Ho's arrow. Kill! Soldiers on both sides rose together, charging out from the forest with shields, maintaining their formation as they pressed in from both flanks, creating an overwhelming force like a landslide or a tsunami. Chapter Mo. It had to be said. The techniques this demonic entity displayed were indeed rather terrifying. If it were an ordinary person, even if several attacked, they would likely end up being obediently devoured alive by this demonic entity. Ordinary people could only watch helplessly, unable to move, as this monster devoured them. If there were slightly more people, it could also use that opportunity to find an opening to break through the encirclement and escape. But the demonic entity had not expected this. Nguyen Ho had brought over 1,000 soldiers, deploying an inescapable net, layer upon layer, both up and down the mountain. From the very beginning, there was no intention of a one-on-one duel. Instead, they concentrated all their forces to encircle and kill it. There was no martial virtue to speak of. When hit, the demonic entity shrieked miserably. It wanted to flee, only to find that the shield formations on both sides had closed in tightly. At this very moment, this demonic creature, trapped by the large army, trembled all over. It turned, wanting to flee back into the mausoleum, but discovered Yuchi Chongwu had already led men to block the cave entrance, their spears and sabers all pointing outwards. The donkey demon, forced into a corner, became ferocious and frenzied, charging straight into the shield formation. Its large body, like a brass chariot, immediately pressed in, its blood basin-like mouth opened, and in an instant, it bit 2 men to death. But it was quickly pierced by the surrounding long spears, stabbing into its body. Kill! The soldiers raised their long spears, pushing it straight back into the encirclement. Finally, it was pierced by spear after spear. Seeing things were not going well, its burst of ferocity immediately dissipated, let alone breaking through the multiple layers of encirclement down the mountain. The very first layer had already trapped it to its death. Hee-haw! Hee-haw! This donkey, restrained by the long spears, actually knelt on the ground with its hind legs, begging for mercy, seemingly trembling. Its 2 front hooves were raised, as if clasping its hands in supplication. Only then did Nguyen Ho realize that what he had said before was true. This donkey could indeed stand upright, and its hind hooves were much stronger than its front ones. But this thought only flashed through his mind. Nguyen Ho showed no mercy whatsoever. Swoosh! He shot another arrow straight at its head, directly piercing its eye, finishing it off. This arrow, shot at close range, had nearly half its length buried deep, because Nguyen Ho had used all his strength, aiming to kill from the very start. The arrow vibrated for a long time after impact. The imperial guards, fearing this donkey demon wasn't dead or might resort to some other demonic trick, stabbed it dozens more times. Only after beheading the donkey did they stop. The donkey head was placed on a platter, like the severed head of an enemy general, and respectfully presented to Nguyen Ho by Yuchi Chongwu. Quote, "Your Majesty's divine archery has eradicated the evil demon." Yuchi Chongwu knelt on the ground, presenting it with both hands. Although that demonic entity had only clashed with him once, Yuchi Chongwu had sensed its terror. Not to mention hearing that this demon truly knew demonic arts. Although Nguyen Ho had to rely on the strength of many to kill this demonic entity. The fact that he personally finished it off was undeniable. Especially Nguyen Ho's astonishingly accurate archery. Furthermore, most people were shaken by the demon's arts. Yet Nguyen Ho could face the demon directly, calmly drawing his bow and nocking an arrow. In Yuchi Chongwu's eyes, wasn't this proof of the Son of Heaven's majesty? At this moment, he was truly willing to submit. If Yuchi Chongwu was like this, how much more so others? Nguyen Ho leading the imperial guards on a hunt had, to some extent, established his prestige. It could also be considered achieving one of his goals. Drip, drip. Nguyen Ho looked at the enormous donkey head displayed before him, blood still dripping from it. At this very moment, he also understood a principle. What immortals, what exotic beasts, even demons and monsters. In this world, they were no match for heavenly soldiers and myriad horses, unable to withstand a volley of 10,000 arrows. The Son of Heaven, controlling the myriad people of the 9 provinces, was the supreme celestial emperor in this mortal realm. Nguyen Ho ordered Yuchi Chongwu to report the situation inside the mausoleum. Then ordered him to clear out the living and the remains from the tomb. He then had the mausoleum destroyed and quickly withdrew his troops. Although it was unclear whether the rumors among the common folk were true. The matter of ghost soldiers passing through sounded much harder to deal with than this donkey demon. Before nightfall, the entire contingent began to withdraw to the military camp. Return, having hunted a demonic entity. This hunting trip could be considered a complete success. The military camp, although it was a hunt, all procedures were still practiced as if for a military campaign. This camp was also set up in a rudimentary fashion. Outside, there were sentry posts and patrols. Inside the large tent, a lamp was lit. Nguyen Ho sat quietly at a table, fiddling with a longbow. Late at night, the box containing the demon's skull suddenly emitted a strange kind of movement. Then, a terrifying black shadow appeared in the large tent. Through the tent fabric, the massive, ferocious form of a tiger could be seen under the torchlight, pouncing towards some kind of strange, malevolent entity. With sounds of chewing and swallowing, everything vanished without a trace. This seemed to be an iron law. The souls of those killed by Nguyen Ho's own hand would ultimately be devoured by the fierce tiger. Unable to resist, roar, before merging back into Nguyen Ho's body, the fierce tiger once again spat out a sphere of light. Tran soul summoning. Nguyen Ho saw scenes of dark, eerie images. Beneath a tall altar, a group of Wuxi shamans tied a living person to the base of the altar. Then, the surrounding Wuxi shamans continuously emitted various sounds, as if trying to control or intimidate the opponent by producing a certain type of sound. Nguyen Ho immediately noticed the difference. Tran soul? It was soul, not essence. And the so-called soul summoning. It was said to use sound as a medium to shake the opponent's soul. As long as one heard the sound, they would be unable to move. The louder the summoner's voice, the more filled with emotion, the greater the anger, or the more majestic, the greater and more intense the effect. Alternatively, emitting an even more terrifying sound could achieve a similar effect. If one were to say, Tran essence was still just a pure memory, allowing one to master a certain skill. Then the power bestowed by this Tran soul, in a certain sense, had already surpassed the concept of a skill. It had some unimaginable aspects, more akin to divine abilities, or perhaps, magical arts, but upon careful consideration, Nguyen Ho vaguely felt he understood some of the principles behind it. When a person is extremely frightened, their body becomes unable to move. Commonly, this is also called the freeze response. It was just that Nguyen Ho felt there were many points that surpassed reality. What kind of power was it? That with a simple shout, could cause most people's bodies to exhibit a freeze response. Moreover, it could also make people obey commands. Hypnosis? Or some kind of mystical power that unknowingly instills fear in the human body? Nguyen Ho didn't understand it clearly and didn't dwell on it further. Instead, He considered how to use this ability for problems he might encounter later. Cheng Yuangu's words. The one holding the bronze-patterned saber kneels. Nguyen Ho still remembered the woman's warning that day. Someone would try to harm him on his return journey. Having known this news early on, Nguyen Ho had several things he wanted to do next. First, find a way to protect his own life. Second, eliminate this person who wanted to harm him. Third, find out who was pulling the strings behind this person. No matter what, this soul summoning ability would be of great use next. But it was, after all, Nguyen Ho's first time possessing such an ability. And one that resembled magical arts at that. He didn't know how to use it. At the critical moment, do I shout, stop? Or, kill, die? What shout would be louder, more intimidating, and have a better effect? Nguyen Ho hadn't thought it through yet when someone requested an audience. Your Majesty. A blue and white porcelain wine jar was brought in and placed before Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho glanced at it and asked, "What is this?" The other person replied, "Donkey penis." Said to be medicinal. Nguyen Ho had no desire to eat this. And moreover, he didn't believe in the theory of nourishing form with form. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Tai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Hai Nguyen Ho's imperial carriage and ceremonial retinue had been recalled at some unknown point, at this moment. He was riding a gray-green horse. It was just that he didn't seem very accustomed to riding, only managing to maintain his balance with difficulty when the horse moved slowly. Nguyen Ho pulled the reins, hugging the horse's back tightly. He thought to himself, sometime, I must acquire a Tran Fach horsemanship technique. The supply carts were laden with game. The marching columns slowed down, and more scouts were dispatched to patrol the road ahead. Even while marching, many still wore their armor, their bowstrings not loosened in the slightest. At first glance, it made one feel as if they weren't returning to the capital, but rather passing through enemy territory. Nguyen Ho, mounted on his horse, asked the guard beside him, "What of the messengers sent back to the capital?" Nguyen Ho had already sent men with an imperial edict back to the capital, ordering all civil and military officials, along with the imperial guards in the capital, to come 20 li out of the city tomorrow to welcome his return. The guard replied, "Your Majesty." Several groups set out early this morning. They should reach the capital by afternoon. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly. Sending men back to the capital was a decision based on several considerations. First, if anything unexpected happened on the road, the imperial guards in the western capital would be mobilized, thus providing reinforcements. Second, if the mastermind behind the scenes was someone from the western capital, by having them come out of the city to greet him, Nguyen Ho could seize the opportunity to capture them all at once. Third, if no one came out from the capital, and there were no reinforcements, it would indicate that a major incident had occurred in the capital, and he should immediately think of countermeasures, rather than returning to the capital obliviously and being captured. Of course, there were other calculations as well. As for whether the attackers were the western capital's imperial guards, Nguyen Ho felt it was unlikely, even if it were so. He was not afraid, even if the imperial guards, from top to bottom, were incited. At most only a few dozen to over 100 would be determined to rebel. The others would, at most, be accomplices under duress, or perhaps wouldn't even know what was happening, if they were within the imperial city. And these individuals managed to capture the Son of Heaven, isolate him from the outside, and then issue orders in the Son of Heaven's name. The entire imperial guard would naturally obey. But if the entire imperial guard corps was ordered to leave the city to surround and kill him, a Son of Heaven, he only needed to show himself and shout. And then the more than 1,000 sons and brothers of the imperial army who had gone hunting under his command would rally their comrades. He feared that in an instant, these men would immediately turn their weapons and rebel, at the very least. Most would not dare to make a move. The main army advanced along the main road, not taking any side paths, nor choosing any detours. It wasn't that Nguyen Ho was being stubborn, but rather that by taking the main road, he feared no ambush. Whoosh whoosh. On the main road, whirlwinds swept up sand and dust, making it difficult for people to open their eyes. Nguyen Ho rode his horse over a slope. Looking up, he saw horses galloping towards them from the opposite direction. The scout galloped over, was stopped by the escorts, and after his identity was verified, he dismounted to report, "Your Majesty, General Yuchi, ahead is Yuan-Gu City." No unusual movements detected. Yuchi Chongwu glanced at Nguyen Ho, who nodded slightly. Yuchi Chongwu said, "Continue scouting. Report back later." As he spoke, his gaze was extremely sharp. Every place must be personally inspected. If you dare to deceive or be negligent, you will be dealt with by military law. The scout, "Yes." Then he quickly mounted his horse and left without a moment's rest. On the road, everyone was on high alert, paying attention to every movement around them. Nguyen Ho also wore his sword and carried his bow, even dismounting to walk. Unexpectedly, everyone proceeded peacefully, and until the afternoon, there was no disturbance. Seeing that it was gradually getting dark, it was time to find a place to camp. Yuchi Chongwu came forward and said, "Your Majesty, there is a place to camp ahead. Although not as good as a fortified city, it is still better than setting up a temporary camp." Nguyen Ho asked, "Where is it ahead?" Yuchi Chongwu replied, "Stone Bridge Manor. It is the estate of the Chen family of Langfang. At night, the army rested at this estate called Stone Bridge Manor. The Chen family members here respectfully paid their respects to Nguyen Ho, offered their main house for Nguyen Ho to rest in, provided wine and meat for the entire army, and even offered the Chen family's daughters to serve him. Nguyen Ho, however, refused and ordered the entire army to be on guard throughout the night, especially to keep a close watch on the Chen family's people. On one hand, he was worried that there might be a problem with the wine and meat. On the other hand, who knew if this was a honey trap? Although nothing happened in the afternoon, they had not yet returned to the capital, so it was not the time to be careless. The night was late. Nguyen Ho was still not asleep when he suddenly, with keen hearing, detected strange movements in the distance. The evil tiger within Nguyen Ho was alarmed, vaguely wanting to break free from his body. He immediately turned and grabbed his sword, simultaneously having someone put on his armor. A guard strung Nguyen Ho's longbow, and the quiver was also slung at his waist. The entire Stone Bridge Manor had been alerted. When Nguyen Ho came out, torches were already blazing everywhere. Yuchi Chongwu was also issuing orders while rushing to Nguyen Ho's side. Nguyen Ho walked out of the main gate to the main path in the center of the manor. He saw many soldiers gathered between the walls of the houses on both sides, holding long shields planted into the ground. Nguyen Ho, using the torchlight, looked out through the tightly packed shields that resembled a wall. Outside, it was pitch black. Not far away was a small river, and the stone bridge over the river was the stone bridge of Stone Bridge Manor. In the darkness, countless figures seemed to be approaching, and even on this side of the river, innumerable hoofbeats could be clearly heard. It was just that the cries of the galloping animals did not sound like horses. Hee-haw, hee-haw, Yuchi Chongwu understood, "Your Majesty. Those are donkeys braying." For hundreds or thousands of donkeys to be braying incessantly in the middle of the night was truly too abnormal. And regardless of whether it was Nguyen Ho or the others, as soon as they heard the donkeys braying, they immediately thought of one thing. Donkey army? Nether soldiers. Nguyen Ho hadn't expected to finally encounter these Nether soldiers. At the same time, he also realized something. Previously, he had been somewhat puzzled as to where the enemy could possibly mobilize troops from to ambush a son of heaven like him amidst thousands of soldiers. Around the western capital, the only force with such capability, after much thought, was the Imperial Guard. Or was there truly some kind of peerless master who could single-handedly take the head of a high general amidst tens of thousands of troops? At this moment, he finally understood. It turned out the enemy intended to use not living soldiers, but that Nether donkey army. Unfortunately, Nguyen Ho was not proficient in sorcery in that tomb previously. He didn't know how to sever the source of these Nether soldiers. In a desolate field, on an altar built upon a grassy mound, Vu Hitch, wearing a long-horned demon mask, was dancing frenziedly without pause. his mouth emitting crazed cries. Ding dang dang, ding dang dang. In one hand, he held a soul-summoning bell, and in the other hand, he held a bronze knife engraved with Kui dragon patterns. Ding dang dang. As the bell rang continuously, Vu Hitch chanted incantations without stopping. Strong winds howled around. In the darkness, hurried footsteps approached, accompanied by the crazed laughter of vengeful spirits. He he ha ha. Ha 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 ha. On the altar made of grassy mounds, many human hairs could be seen woven together into something resembling scarecrows. That was definitely not the hair of one person, but taken from the bodies of hundreds of people. After letting out a bizarre shriek and finishing the incantation, Vu Hitch, wearing the long-horned demon mask, lit a torch and set the altar ablaze. Whoosh! The flames suddenly flared up, and thick columns of smoke rose into the sky. Those nether soldiers and vengeful spirits, as if smelling a sumptuous feast, advanced one by one to devour the rising smoke. This smoke was all produced by burning human hair, and as the vengeful spirits swallowed it one by one, they seemed to perceive the existence of those people through some kind of medium. Then, the densely packed vengeful spirits instantly dispersed. They rushed into the surrounding peasant huts and farmhouses. Miserable screams rang out, doors were pushed open, and out walked groups of ferocious-looking human demons. In just a moment, those timid farmers and peasant women in the farmhouses, who had never undergone training, all transformed into battle-hardened, death-defying ghost generals of the Nether army. Countless Nether soldiers gathered in the field, obeying the commands of Vu Hitch with the long-horned demon mask. That Vu Hitch blew smoke, and thick, roiling smoke enveloped the Nether soldiers, encasing each one in a layer of armor. At the same time, the sticks, hoes, and spades in their hands transformed into long spears and gleaming, cold swords and sabers. Go, kill that little emperor. At this moment, whispers spread among the Nether soldiers. The murmuring sounds converged, turning into calls. Where are the donkeys? Where are the donkeys? Donkeys. As these words fell, layers upon layers of donkey braying could be heard all around. Those donkeys broke through the mist in the void and ran ceaselessly. But very quickly, they vanished. Hee ha hee ha. These Nether soldiers used human hair as a medium and the peasants in the houses and fields as intermediaries to manifest in the mortal world. But these donkeys, it seemed, could not. The face under Vu Hitch's mask seemed to turn very unsightly as he replied. The lead donkey was killed by that little emperor. The donkeys cannot be summoned. Thus, the densely packed Nether soldiers could only shout for non-existent donkeys as they advanced straight towards Stonebridge Manor. Chapter Ba. The slaughter resumed in an instant. Without any warning, across the river, the rippling sea of rice suddenly erupted with countless breaches, as demonic soldiers swarmed out like locusts. Fire! In front of the manor. Behind the stone bridge, the commanding officers simultaneously issued the order. 200 horn-inlaid bows twanged in unison. Volleys of arrows tore through the air, interspersed with numerous fire arrows, their wicks tracing fiery arcs through the sky. Then, within the wheat field, streaks of fire suddenly erupted, illuminating several hundred grotesque, demonic faces. The Imperial Guard's faces paled, and not just because they were facing demons, but more so because those fiends were raising burning rattan shields, their bodies engulfed in fierce flames as they charged across the stone bridge. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Quote. The fiends advanced, wreathed in fierce flames and thick smoke. The air reverberated with their loud, savage, death-defying laughter, striking terror into the hearts of men. This spectacle delivered a potent visual shock to all who witnessed it. The ghastly-faced demonic soldiers, clad in smoldering green leather armor, their bodies wreathed in fierce flames, charged forward under a hail of arrows. The fierce flames burning on them seemed to cause them no pain. Arrows pierced their flesh, yet unless a vital spot was struck, they charged onward as if possessing immortal bodies. Soon, the two sides clashed in close-quarters combat. Those demonic soldiers, bodies ablaze with fierce fire, threw themselves directly at the imperial guards. Those possessed by vengeful spirits used their own burning bodies to set others ablaze. Heedless of their own injuries as they brandished their sabers, fighting until hacked into pieces. It wasn't just one or two such demonic soldiers, they came in relentless waves. Charging headlong, abandon the bridge, fall back and defend the walls. Yuqi Chongwu, having anticipated this, saw the first line of defense crumble and immediately fell back to the pre-arranged second defensive line to continue their resistance. A large contingent of soldiers regrouped, falling back behind shields and barricades. Initiating the second round of engagement, Nguyen Ho had entrusted all matters of troop deployment and maneuvering to Yuqi Chongwu, not interfering in the slightest. At this moment, Nguyen Ho stood at a high vantage point, his gaze fixed on the distant fields. He was searching for the one controlling these demonic soldiers. That individual couldn't be far. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to control the situation, nor effectively command these demonic soldiers. And just then, as Nguyen Ho searched for his adversary was also searching for him. After a period of fierce fighting, the horizon was now faintly lit with the approaching dawn. His superb archery skills granted Nguyen Ho eyes as sharp as a hawk's, from his elevated position. He quickly spotted something, found him, and at that very same moment, his opponent also discovered Nguyen Ho's location. Over there, Wu Shi shook the bell in his hand, its clear sound instantly traveling into the distance. Carrying a specific rhythm, Nguyen Ho didn't hesitate and immediately issued an order. Capture that sorcerer. Take him alive if you can. But if not, kill him on the spot. The main gate of the manor swung open. From the previously concealed threshing ground, squadrons of fine steeds and cavalry, already in formation, instantly charged out, heading straight for the sorcerer's position. Unexpectedly, however, the enemy had also prepared a surprise contingent, targeting Nguyen Ho's position directly. With a long cry, a band of demonic soldiers attacked Stonebridge Manor from the south. These demonic soldiers moved like gibbons, scaling walls and rooftops, wielding the type of curved knives commonly used by mountain dwellers. They treated walls as ladders and traversed rooftops and beams as if on solid ground. They swiftly advanced on Nguyen Ho's position, and the surrounding guards struggled to hold them back. This caused considerable alarm among the officers and soldiers within the manor, especially Yuqi Chongwu, who was commanding the battle on the main front. Your Majesty, protect His Majesty, protect His Majesty, quickly, return to protect His Majesty. Seeing that the two sides were about to engage in direct combat, ready to strike each other down, Nguyen Ho first drew his bow, nocked an arrow, and struck down an opponent. Then, sweeping his bow left and right, he unleashed a continuous volley, each arrow finding its mark. Those around him fell one after another. Spotting a demonic soldier rushing towards him, leaping and swinging a curved saber, Nguyen Ho instantly activated Tran Hun Soul Beacon. He felt a peculiar difference in his throat. The sound he emitted carried a strange vibration. Previously, Nguyen Ho had even pondered what words to utter when activating this ability for maximum effect. But in this critical moment, Nguyen Ho instinctively unleashed an earth-shattering tiger's roar. Roar. This time, it was countless times more resonant and powerful than the braying of a donkey. Like a fierce gale sweeping through the seven heavens, an invisible wave of energy radiated outwards from Nguyen Ho. This soul-beckoning sorcery, combined with Nguyen Ho's tiger roar, seemed to have undergone a qualitative transformation. The vengeful spirit brandishing the curved saber before him was instantly flung away, and the demonic soldiers charging from all around collapsed to the ground in droves. Before everyone's eyes, in a wide surrounding area, only Nguyen Ho remained standing. The sight was truly awe-inspiring. Nguyen Ho slowly drew the sword at his hip as his men began to rally towards him. Meanwhile, the cavalry in the distance were charging towards Wu Shi. Wu Shi, too, witnessed the scene unfolding around Nguyen Ho. What? Wu Shi exclaimed in astonishment, momentarily even forgetting to flee. Seeing the large force of elite cavalry charging towards him, cutting down his demonic soldiers one by one and rushing straight at him. Wu Shi began to frantically shake his bell. Ding lin lin. ... A cavalryman struck him with the shaft of his spear, sending Wu Shi tumbling to the ground in an instant. Dazed and disoriented, the cavalryman wheeled his horse around, then leaned down and forcefully seized him. Wu Shi was lifted onto the horse like a trussed chicken and carried towards Stonebridge Manor. The early morning sun began to peek through. Nguyen Ho looked at the demonic soldiers sprawled on the ground. None were breathing, all were dead. Not a single one had survived. Or rather, from the moment they were possessed by vengeful spirits the previous night. These individuals had already become walking corpses. This malevolent sorcery, from its very inception, had used the deaths of these peasants as the price to create a legion of demonic soldiers, intended to function as elite troops. However, as the sunlight fell upon the bodies of these demonic soldiers, something strange occurred. The armored, fearsome-looking demonic soldiers, one by one, transformed back into ordinary peasants. They wore no armor, the swords and spears in their hands were merely ordinary sticks, hoes, and shovels. This time, everyone gasped in astonishment. How can this be? Was it illusion magic? Then they looked at their own fallen comrades. Their bodies bore only superficial wounds. Some had no wounds at all. Yet they were dead. Nguyen Ho, too, found it strange. No wounds on their bodies. So how did they die? Yuchi Chongwu, who seemed to have some knowledge of such occult arts, explained, "Your Majesty may not be aware, but this is the nature of such malevolent sorcery. Even if it involves feigning gods and spirits. If the afflicted person's will is weak and they believe it to be real, then it becomes real for them. It is still because my soldiers are not yet elite enough. If everyone were united with an iron will, these demons and apparitions would scatter before a charging army. How could they cause such trouble?" Hearing this, Nguyen Ho vaguely began to understand some characteristics of this malevolent sorcery. The weapons in the hands of the demonic soldiers were clearly illusory. Merely a trick of the eye. But if it struck someone, and that person believed they had been truly wounded by a blade or spear, then they would indeed die. Nguyen Ho walked over to where Wu Shi was being restrained. His long-horned demon mask had been removed, revealing a dark-skinned, middle-aged man. As Nguyen Ho opened his mouth to speak, a sound like the roar of a fierce tiger assaulted Wu Zai's ears. "Speak." The shout was so powerful that Wu Shi felt as if his soul was about to be torn from his body. "Who sent you?" His body felt uncontrollable, fear stripping away any thought of deceit. His eyes somewhat vacant, sweat poured down him like rain as he stammered, trembling, "This lowly one is Ma Zui. It was Prince Ma who ordered me to come here, to summon the demonic soldiers and assassinate your Majesty." While Nguyen Ho was still pondering which Prince Ma this could be, the expressions of those around him changed drastically. The three-eyed Prince Ma? Only then did Nguyen Ho realize that this Prince Ma was not a true prince of the realm, but rather a renowned deity. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Bon, Break Camp. Break Camp. This place is not suitable for a long stay. Who knows if there are still malevolent spirits causing trouble. Your Majesty, please return to the capital quickly. Outside, soldiers moved back and forth. Inside his quarters, Nguyen Ho wiped the blood from his sword. Having been up for half the night, Nguyen Ho was indeed a bit weary. As the camp was being struck, he leaned against something, intending to take a short nap to recover his strength. As he sat down, he felt the scented sachet in his chest. He sniffed it lightly, and its fragrance seeped into his very core. Just as he closed his eyes, a call reached his ears. Your Majesty. Nguyen Ho opened his eyes. That celestial maiden, Du Hong, had entered his dream to meet him. Unlike the previous time when Nguyen Ho had entered the mural, there were no jade pavilions or pearl towers, nor were there throngs of exquisitely beautiful palace maidens. He was still in the same place, in the house at Thatch Kiu village. It was just that, everything around him was dim and hazy, as if shrouded in a layer of mist. The celestial maiden Ju Hong seemed to float in the sky. Like a moon palace maiden descended to the mortal realm. But in a flash, she appeared beside Nguyen Ho. The celestial maiden Ju Hong offered a cup of wine. And Nguyen Ho accepted it. Your Majesty first eradicated evil spirits. Then slayed malevolent ghouls. Truly a true dragon descended to the mortal world. Impervious to all evil. Nguyen Ho looked at the celestial maiden Ju Hong. I must still thank the celestial maiden for her warning. Otherwise, this calamity would not have been overcome so easily. The celestial maiden Ju Hong, I too did not expect your Majesty's martial prowess and courage to be so extraordinary. The celestial maiden Ju Hong had originally intended for Nguyen Ho to avoid the donkey demon and Vu Hitch. Not to confront the enemy head-on as he had. Nguyen Ho's series of actions had also greatly astonished her. From the very beginning, she had never imagined that Nguyen Ho would slay the donkey demon first, thereby having the strength of Vu Hitch's army of netherworld soldiers. And then, without any hesitation, directly engage the netherworld soldiers once more. And her appearance this time was also due to Nguyen Ho's series of astonishing displays. She felt, this Nguyen Ho didn't quite seem like the rumors described. Perhaps he truly possessed some of the true dragon's potential. She felt she had to place a further wager. Thinking of this, the celestial maiden Ju Hong asked with a look of reverence, "What does your Majesty intend to do next?" Nguyen Ho looked at her and asked in return, "The celestial maiden Ju Hong has aided me multiple times. I wonder if you have any desires? Anything I can grant, I will surely consent to." The celestial maiden Ju Hong smiled, then did not voice her wish. Instead, she once again revealed a piece of information to Nguyen Ho. Your Majesty has killed the ghost master of Hell's Path. And now you have angered Lord Ma of this underworld. Next, I fear the capital will be overrun by demons. And ghosts and gods will flock there. Your Majesty must also be careful. Nguyen Ho's expression immediately turned solemn. Careful of whom? The celestial maiden Ju Hong continued, Nguyen Wan. And just at this moment, Uat Tri Sung Vu's call came from the courtyard. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Nguyen Ho looked outside but saw no sign of him. Only a dense, obscuring mist. At this time, the celestial maiden Ju Hong stood up and bowed in farewell to Nguyen Ho. I invite your Majesty to bring that mural into the imperial city and establish a shrine for me to reside in. I can help your Majesty suppress mischievous ghosts and wandering spirits causing chaos. And in times of crisis, I can also lend my aid. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly and opened his eyes. Looking out into the courtyard again, the thick mist dispersed. That hazy feeling completely vanished. And everything around him became real. Nguyen Ho stood up and waved his hand. Uat Tri Sung Vu entered the house and knelt on the ground. Nguyen Ho. What happened? Uat Tri Sung Vu, Your Majesty. I was just on patrol when I suddenly detected a demonic wind. In broad daylight, black smoke swirled up. Hundreds, thousands of ghost horses, billowing black smoke, came and carried that sorcerer away. I risked my life to pursue, but still couldn't catch up. That black smoke crossed the river and then suddenly dispersed, after which nothing more was seen, allowing that sorcerer to escape. Nguyen Ho now understood why the celestial maiden Ju Hong had spoken as she did. Whether it was that donkey head or the netherworld soldiers, they were merely things exposed on the surface. The truly terrifying figure was still hidden beneath the lake's surface. In that gloomy darkness, truly, someone with powerful backing. But Nguyen Ho was not afraid. If the opponent truly had no scruples or could do anything, why not kill him directly? This once again confirmed Nguyen Ho's previous assessments. All sorts of demons and monsters were merely dreamlike illusions dependent on reality. The greatest threat to Nguyen Ho still came from the mortal, real world. Only by collusion between both sides could such a major conflict be incited. Uat Tri Sung Vu. I have failed in my duty. Please punish me, Your Majesty. However, although that sorcerer escaped, he didn't manage to take his magical artifacts with him. Speaking of this, Uat Tri Sung Vu raised both hands. presenting the soul-summoning bell and the bronze short blade with a demonic pattern. Nguyen Ho took the bronze bell with one hand and shook it with the other. He was merely a servant, knowing nothing and capable of nothing. Without a master behind him, he alone couldn't achieve anything significant. That Vu Hitch was not formidable. Nguyen Ho had interrogated him and found he possessed no real abilities. He was far inferior to the ghost master in the palace whom Nguyen Ho had previously killed. That this person could mobilize so many netherworld soldiers with a single incantation was because those netherworld soldiers were nurtured by someone else. That someone had given him the incantations and items, enabling him to rely on these to attempt the assassination of the Son of Heaven. In other words, without someone else's permission, he couldn't even summon a minor ghost. Ultimately, he was just a pawn thrown out, who, by holding that person's command token, gained such intimidating magical power and abilities. Nguyen Ho had originally intended to keep him alive to lure out a bigger fish. But now it seemed the forces behind him had been thoroughly probed. And he had even seen them with his own eyes. Yet it vaguely exceeded his expectations. It was about time they should set off for the capital. By the riverbank outside Thach Kiu village, horses neighed, and men stood at attention. Officers and soldiers sternly awaiting orders. Mounting his horse, Nguyen Ho's thoughts turned to the celestial maiden Ju Hong, along with Lord Ma of the underworld and Hell's Path. Indeed, I still need someone well versed in the ways of ghosts and gods to assist. This was only the beginning. The truly formidable fiends and malevolent demons were yet to come. As they marched to the outskirts of the western capital city, scouts reported back, quote, "Your Majesty, General, at the pavilion stations outside the city, no one has come out to welcome the imperial arrival." Uat Tri Sung Vu was aghast and hurriedly pressed. Could it be that the imperial edict was not delivered? A captain beside him stepped forward, clasping his hands tightly as he reported, "As Your Majesty instructed, your subordinate dispatched 6 groups of messengers to the capital to deliver the news. It's impossible that none of them delivered the message." Uat Tri Sung Vu was even more astonished upon hearing this. If there was no issue with the messengers, it meant that the western capital city had received the edict but had not acted according to the Son of Heaven's decree. This problem was even greater. It meant that something had gone wrong within the western capital. Uat Tri Sung Vu immediately turned and looked towards the Son of Heaven. "Your Majesty, to be on the safe side, should we not?" Nguyen Ho reined in his horse, his eyes flickering. Nguyen Ho had originally intended to capture that sorcerer alive, then use him as a witness. Then, when the Grand Army entered the capital and the officials came out to greet them, under the pretext of sweeping away rebels, he would directly apprehend his opponents right outside the city. As for whether you truly rebelled, whether you truly had rebelled, or had only prepared to rebel in your mind, once captured, it would no longer be up to you. But it seemed Nguyen Ho's intentions had been seen through by others. First, the sorcerer was forcibly rescued in broad daylight using sorcery, regardless of the cost. Then, the civil and military officials and imperial guards who should have come to welcome him did not appear at all. All of this confirmed this point. But at the same time, it also further proved that the opponent was panicking, even reacting somewhat clumsily, unsure of what to do. Everything had changed too quickly. Within a matter of days, this series of unexpected, unconventional blows by Nguyen Ho had left his adversaries reeling and disoriented. Thinking of this, Nguyen Ho felt it was even more imperative to return to the capital. Return to the capital and see exactly which band of thieves is plotting chaos. Nguyen Ho spurred his horse, continuing towards the capital city. Chapter Nam Nguyen Ho led his troops back to the capital. He, who usually rode a horse, had now ascended into the imperial carriage. The Son of Heaven's grand procession moved out ostentatiously. The grander the display, the better, so that everyone would know and see that the Son of Heaven was here. In the sky, the sun blazed brightly, yet on the ground, what struck the eye was the sight of the capital's main gates. Tightly shut, outside the city, wooden barricades were stacked layer upon layer. Elite imperial guards in armor were arrayed in formation. And archers were also ready. Nguyen Ho commanded just over 1,000 men, compared to the vast, dense ranks of soldiers outside the city. Plus such a formidable fortress. They truly seemed insignificant. Yet, at this moment, the demeanor and morale of the two sides appeared completely reversed. Nguyen Ho's side exuded an overwhelming aura, while the defenders of the city were in disarray and fear. Yuchi Chongwu spurred his horse forward, reined it in sharply, pulling its head up, and shouted loudly, "You are committing treason and rebellion. Do you not fear the extermination of your 9 familial relations?" Instantly, the soldiers outside the city began to whisper among themselves. Quote, "It's Yuchi Chongwu. His Majesty's procession has also arrived." Nonsense. They said His Majesty has been harmed by demons. Look again. At this moment, the left guard general of the Imperial Guard, who was defending the city from outside, stepped forward and loudly berated the wavering Imperial Guards. Do not listen to his nonsense. Outside the city is not the Son of Heaven, but a demon. The true Son of Heaven has been harmed by demons. The one outside the city now is merely an evil creature in human guise. If you let this evil creature into the city, your entire families, young and old, will die without a burial place. But this alone was still not enough to pacify everyone. The Prime Minister has already notified the Pillar of State Grand General to bring his troops here. We only need to hold the capital city. Once the main army arrives, we can exterminate this evil. From the very beginning, the opposing side had not expected these men to take the initiative to attack. These men only needed to hold out and not surrender until the Pillar of State Grand General, Pei Yuanshao, arrived to kill Nguyen Ho, who had completely lost control. They could be said to have spared no expense. Nguyen Ho saw this situation. He became even more certain of his previous suspicions. His series of unexpected actions, along with the sudden decisiveness and courage he displayed, had shattered all of the enemy's schemes, even leaving them at a loss, making one wrong move after another. Nguyen Ho, who had been somewhat worried, now felt like laughing upon seeing the enemy's actions. Seeing this, he directly donned his armor, mounted his horse, and rode to the front of the formation, allowing the enemy soldiers to see him. Nguyen Ho's gaze swept over everyone, and he said loudly, "I have arrived." This time, the commotion in front of the Imperial Guard formation grew even louder. Then, Nguyen Ho looked directly at that Imperial Guard officer. "You, treacherous officials and rebellious knaves, have repeatedly tried to assassinate me. First in the palace, then outside the palace. Now, you rebellious traitors, do you not even want to pretend anymore?" However, the enemy's claim that Nguyen Ho was a demon in disguise was not entirely baseless nonsense. Especially after that ghost shaman, Nua Chui, seemed to have sensed something when he previously confronted Nguyen Ho, and after he returned to report. These people made such a decision. It had to be said. Although these people felt something was amiss, they still decided to risk a desperate counterattack, which was also a correct move. On one side were treacherous officials and rebellious knaves. On the other was a world-disrupting demon. The two sides were enacting a drama of contending for the mandate of heaven, fighting each other both inside and outside this capital city. And at this moment, the enemy intended to deliver a fatal blow. On the city wall, the ghost shaman Nua Chui, who had escaped earlier, appeared once again, standing at a great distance and shouting down below. Quote, "You, a demon from who knows where, have taken on His Majesty's appearance. You can deceive the mortal eyes of commoners. But can you still deceive these Dharma eyes of mine? Today, under this clear sky and broad daylight, I shall see how you, this demon, can cause trouble. Evil creature, reveal your true form." Having spoken, this person immediately prepared to present evidence to prove that Nguyen Ho was indeed a demon. The ghost shaman Nua Chui raised an object high. It was a bronze mirror. Under the sunlight, the bronze mirror glittered with a dazzling light. As the ghost shaman Nua Chui directed it downwards, the light swept across the ground, on the verge of striking Nguyen Ho. He did not know what this mirror was, but he understood clearly that if it struck him, Something bad would likely happen. At this critical moment, Nguyen Ho suddenly opened his mouth, shouting the other's name. Nua Chui. Nguyen Ho shouted. In the ghost shaman Nua Chui's mind, the image of a roaring fierce tiger immediately appeared, shaking him so violently that his head spun. The mark that Nguyen Ho had previously carved deep into his mind using the soul summoning technique was reactivated by this direct call of his name. This technique, when used against someone who had previously been subjected to it, especially by calling their name directly, would be even more precise. And furthermore, even stronger. In an instant, the ghost shaman Nua Chui felt an extreme fear rush to the top of his head. His internal organs felt as if they were frozen solid, and his limbs became limp and powerless. And at this moment, Nguyen Ho was still below the city wall, loudly denouncing his crimes. You, this evil creature, yesterday brought Yin soldiers and ghosts to harm me, were captured by me, and then escaped using demonic arts and evil methods. You are a vile and stealthy sort. Yet you dare to pretend to speak of clear sky and broad daylight. I am the Son of Heaven. I am the universe. Why would I fear you? Why don't you quickly accept your death? That phrase, why don't you quickly accept your death, echoed like a great bell in the ghost shaman Nua Chui's heart. It directly caused his hand to tremble, his body to sway, and he, along with the heavy bronze mirror, fell from the top of the city wall to the ground. At this time, the Imperial Guard officer below thought to himself that things were not good and prepared to risk taking the initiative to gain an advantage. The Imperial Guard officer charged out, drawing his bow and aiming straight at Nguyen Ho, who stood at a distance. But Nguyen Ho was faster than him. He had already drawn his bow and knocked an arrow. And one arrow struck the officer in the face. Whoosh! Ah! The opponent fell from his horse, his fate unknown. The longer he used it, and the more he used it, the more refined Nguyen Ho's archery became. Nguyen Ho was too lazy to prepare anything to prove himself, to prove that he was the true Son of Heaven. Victory naturally proved truth. If defeated, whatever was said would be useless. Nguyen Ho raised his hand, then directly gave the order. Charge! If this were a true battle between evenly matched enemies, Nguyen Ho's action would indeed be suicidal. But at this moment, the situation was completely different. Yuchi Chongwu, hearing Nguyen Ho's command, did not hesitate in the slightest, reformed his troops, and together they pressed forward overwhelmingly. Slowly, but with an orderly formation, a dark mass advanced like a landslide and tsunami, crushing the psychological defenses of everyone on the opposing side. At the same time, Yuchi Chongwu also ordered everyone to shout in unison, "You are merely being deceived by treacherous officials. Now that the treacherous officials have been executed, why don't you open the city gates to welcome His Majesty? Do you truly want His Majesty to exterminate your 9 familial relations? Lay down your weapons, and bygones will be bygones." This time, the Imperial Guards arrayed at the city gate immediately threw down their weapons one after another, kneeling on the ground and surrender. Some even proactively stepped forward to use horses to pull away the barricades, clearing a path into the city. Nguyen Ho rode to the foot of the city wall and looked up at the top. The people on the city wall avoided his gaze. Nguyen Ho's eyes fixed on one person among them on the wall. It was a gate captain. He remembered this person. Previously, when he used the Tran Fach Tuong Nyan technique to examine this person, he discovered that this person was loyal to him. It was just that this person's martial arts and abilities were truly too poor. And moreover, he was under the command of the Lin Ho general, responsible for guarding each city gate. Yet at this moment, this person was perfectly usable. "Are you Gate Captain Nguyen Jiako? I met you before I left the city. Those outside do not recognize me. Do you also not recognize me? Still not opening the gate?" Hearing the Son of Heaven actually call his name, Nguyen Jiako had no choice but to stick his head out to look down. Then immediately knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "It is His Majesty. It truly is His Majesty." Furthermore, he was just a minor gate captain. Yet the Son of Heaven remembered his name. At this moment, a strong sense of gratitude surged in Nguyen Jiako's heart. Then he turned his head and shouted towards those on the city wall and below. By His Majesty's command, quickly open the city gates. Welcome His Majesty into the capital. Quickly open the gates. Quick, quick, quick. This call from Nguyen Ho immediately broke the silence on the city wall. The city gates cannot be opened. Ah, kill. Open the city gates. Through the city gate, one could vaguely hear someone shouting that the gate could not be opened, followed by the sound of swords being drawn and clashing. Before long, Gate Captain Nguyen Ho had managed to open the city gate. As the city gate slowly creaked open, rows of soldiers knelt on the ground to welcome Nguyen Ho into the city. Their heads bowed low to the ground, and all around lay no small number of corpses, blood pooling on the ground. Nguyen Ho sat on horseback, one hand on his sword, slowly advancing into the capital city, assessing this capital once more from a different perspective, hand grasping the sword. Only then is one the emperor. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Sao clearly. It was Nguyen Ho who was the son of heaven, finally returning to his own, loyal, western capital. And yet, at this very moment, Nguyen Ho felt like a rebel. Sword in hand, entering the capital city, emotions surged within him, an irrepressible smile playing on his lips. His heart was filled with immense joy. All of this is mine. As soon as Nguyen Ho entered the city, he immediately ordered his officers to seize and take over the defense of the city gates and palace gates. At the same time, he had all the officers in the barracks who had participated in the rebellion placed under guard. And most of the soldiers' armor and weapons were confiscated and stored in the armory. Afterwards, Nguyen Ho bathed and changed his clothes, then summoned all civil and military officials to the Zishan Hall. Nguyen Ho sat majestically on the dragon throne, not entirely adhering to decorum, but in a way that was most comfortable for him. On any other day, someone would likely have immediately pointed out that the Son of Heaven's posture was improper. But at this moment, no one dared to utter a word. Everyone was utterly terrified, and no one dared to look directly at the sovereign. Greetings, Your Majesty. In the Grand Hall, Nguyen Ho glanced over the assembled officials. Quote, My beloved ministers, you have all arrived. Then, Nguyen Ho seemed to be looking for someone. Where is the Prime Minister? The officials looked around. Indeed, there was no sign of the Prime Minister. At this moment, a eunuch leaned in and whispered something to Nguyen Ho, who then looked towards the outside of the hall. Yuchi Chongwu, who was guarding the entrance of the Grand Hall, nodded slightly at Nguyen Ho. Then, a figure appeared outside the hall entrance, bowing deeply towards the inside. It was Zhu Jiako, the captain who had previously guarded the city gate. Nguyen Ho understood, then asked again, Where is the Prime Minister? Why hasn't he arrived yet? Zhu Jiako now stepped into the Grand Hall and said with utmost reverence, Your Majesty, the Prime Minister's residence is ablaze. The fire is spreading rapidly and uncontrollably. Difficult to extinguish. Nguyen Ho. What? Nguyen Ho immediately rushed out of the Grand Hall, and the officials followed suit, forming a long line, standing outside the Grand Hall. Everyone could easily see thick black smoke billowing in the distance. Although it was daytime and the flames were not overly distinct, everyone knew a major fire was raging there. Immediately send people to extinguish the fire, and the Prime Minister must be rescued safely. A thought flashed through Nguyen Ho's mind. This is my uncle. But he was genuinely afraid he wouldn't be able to stop himself from laughing out loud on the spot. So he didn't say it. A short while later, someone came to report. The great fire had been extinguished. But the Prime Minister could not be saved. He had perished in the flames along with his household retainers and aides. Nguyen Ho stood silently for a moment, then turned his head and said, Remember this, the Prime Minister was assassinated by treacherous officials. Arrange a grand funeral. Beside him, some officials were still stunned, while others seemed to have understood something. In short, the imperial court, which had been quiet and heavy, in a blink of an eye, because of the Prime Minister's death, paradoxically became somewhat enlivened. The Prime Minister's death was truly good, truly timely. Nguyen Ho returned to the throne. And below, The officials presented their memorials one after another. Quote, "The Prime Minister must have been murdered by the Grand General Pillar of the State. Pei Yuanzhao. Pei Yuanzhao is wolf-hearted and treacherous. Everyone knows this. Your Majesty cannot afford not to be vigilant. We ministers cannot live under the same sky as that Pei Yuanzhao. Your Majesty, please quickly investigate this case thoroughly. There must be accomplices of the rebel Pei Yuanzhao in the court." Nguyen Ho listened to the remonstrations that had suddenly become lively and full of vigor. Seeing the entire court expressing utmost loyalty in the Grand Hall, he once again employed the art of Tran Fach Tuong Nian. He immediately discovered that among the court officials, many who had previously hated him had become neutral. Many officials who were originally neutral had directly sided with him. Even, in that brief moment, the facial features of some individuals subtly change, allowing Nguyen Ho to gain a deeper understanding of the Tuong Nian art. How fortunate! The Prime Minister's death like this was the best possible situation at the moment, otherwise Nguyen Ho would have had to conduct a major purge of the entire court. And more than half of the civil officials who previously sided with the Prime Minister would have been unusable. At this critical juncture, Nguyen Ho didn't have the time to conduct a major purge and complete overhaul, only to then hastily establish a system capable of supporting the nation's operations. He remembered clearly that Grand General Pillar of the State, Pei Yuanzhao, was at this very moment still leading his troops towards the western capital, claiming to eliminate traitors, suppress evil, and support the state. Seeing the officials clamorously expressing their stances, Nguyen Ho, on the contrary, showed disagreement. "My beloved ministers, you are overly worried. Minister Pei is a pillar of the state. How could he commit such an act of treason? There must be a misunderstanding. When Minister Pei arrives, the misunderstanding will naturally be resolved." Nguyen Ho reassured the officials, made a few minor adjustments, and then concluded this audience. Dusk fell. Nguyen Ho stood by the pond where he had once fallen into the water. Zhu Jiako unbuckled the saber from his waist, stepped forward, and knelt. Nguyen Ho was feeding the fish in the pond and didn't turn his head to look. He asked, "At the time of his death, did the Prime Minister do anything?" Zhu Jiako. "The Prime Minister refused to maintain his dignity, so your humble servant could only help him maintain it." Nguyen Ho. "Did he say anything else?" Zhu Jiako. "In the end, that traitor said." Nguyen Ho. "Speak freely. Don't hesitate." Zhu Jiako. "He said that after death, he would transform into a vengeful ghost and would definitely return to the mortal realm." Nguyen Ho smiled, tossed the rest of the fish food into the pond, then turned to Zhu Jiako and said, "I am preparing to establish a pursuit bureau, and you will be its head." Zhu Jiako didn't know what the Pursuit Bureau did, but he knew that in an instant, he had risen meteorically. Quote, "Thank you for your Majesty's immense grace." Zhu Jiako's martial arts skills were indeed mediocre. Possessing no real abilities, he was truly unqualified as a military general. However, Nguyen Ho discovered that he seemed to have potential in another aspect. Of course, more importantly, Zhu Jiako had opened the city gates for him at the crucial moment. Even if he were truly a useless good-for-nothing, Nguyen Ho had to promote him at this time. Afterwards, Nguyen Ho summoned Yuchi Chongwu. Towards the civil officials, Nguyen Ho made no major moves for the time being. But for the military generals, Nguyen Ho was preparing to conduct a top-to-bottom purge. Even based on the somewhat poor performance of the Imperial Guards when facing the nether soldiers of that motley crew earlier. He knew the Imperial Guard was not an elite force, but it was the only force he currently controlled. Moreover, with a force of about 10,000 men, they could change many situations and accomplish many things. Late at night, in the dim palace, roar, Nguyen Ho saw the tiger within his body emerge once more. Only this time, the ferocious tiger did not soar into the sky but passed through the green floor tiles and vanished without a trace. Nguyen Ho looked down at the green tiles of his bedchamber, his expression contemplative, and at that very moment, in the gloomy sky of the netherworld, flashes of lightning suddenly erupted. A terrifying tiger's claw tore through the astral winds. And a ferocious tiger's head peered down, scrutinizing. On the desolate gray land of the netherworld stood a grim and terrifying temple. Rumble. Outside the hall, hordes of ghost general nether soldiers prostrated themselves on the ground. A group of horse-faced vengeful ghosts were taking a roll call. At this moment, seeing the lightning flash, they followed the sound of thunder and looked up at the sky. And they saw the tiger's head opened its blood basin like maw and took a gentle breath. Several nether soldiers below were instantly swept up into the sky. Whoosh! The ferocious tiger swallowed those few nether soldiers in one gulp, then retracted its head back to the mortal realm. And inside that grim and terrifying temple, a three-eyed deity looked up at the sky, letting out an inhuman laugh that made one's hair stand on end. And at this very moment, two figures stepped through the void and darkness, faintly appearing before the temple. Two more figures had journeyed from the mortal world to the netherworld. One was the man who, during the day, had been angrily shouted at by Nguyen Ho, falling from the city wall to his death. His body shattered. In life, he was barely human. In death, he became a horse-faced ghost attendant. The other wore a purple official's robe, but his entire body was charred black like charcoal. His eyes filled with venomous resentment and hatred. It was none other than the Prime Minister who had just recently died in the Great Fire. That Prime Minister was wreathed in sky-high black miasma, although he knew no evil arts or witchcraft in life. After death, his appearance was far more terrifying than that of a nobody like the horse-faced ghost attendant. Nguyen Ho held a vermilion brush, dazed before his writing desk. Palace attendants waited silently on either side. Outside the screen, Nguyen Ho lifted his head. The tiger had returned. That tiger circled Nguyen Ho a few times, spat out several rays of orb-like light that shone into his eyes, and then slowly merged into his body. Tran Fach writing art. Tran Fach saber art. Nguyen Ho perceived the skills brought by the Tran Fach, and at the same time, he also realized something seemed to be missing. So there's no skill from that horse-faced attendant? Could it be because he died indirectly from the fall, so it doesn't count as me killing him? Chapter Bay. Nguyen Ho arrived at the training grounds early in the morning. General of the Right Guard, Yuchi Chongwu, who had just been recently promoted, was waiting here with a group of officers. There were also many figures tied up on the ground. A soldier beside him, kneeling on one knee, held up several boxes high for Nguyen Ho to inspect. Inside each box was a human head with a ferocious expression. Nguyen Ho didn't look at the bound individuals or the bloody severed heads. Instead, he directly had a horse brought to him and ordered men to set up archery targets. Nguyen Ho sat firmly on horseback, as if born in the saddle. No longer unsteady as before, he could naturally draw a bow while mounted. Furthermore, he could draw the bow with both his left and right hands, hitting targets 100 paces away. The Imperial Guard soldiers Nguyen Ho had brought back from outside immediately erupted in cheers. Last night, there hadn't seemed to be any major disturbances. Most ordinary soldiers had been confined to their barracks and forbidden to go out. But Nguyen Ho, following the list, had already reshuffled most of the Imperial Guard officers from top to bottom. Many who had sided with the rebels in yesterday's major upheaval had either been killed or captured. Regardless of their capabilities, the individuals Nguyen Ho promoted first were those whose heart aspect, according to the Tran Fach Tuong Nyan art, showed loyalty to him. It had to be said. This physiognomy art could be considered an incredibly practical and powerful tool, especially for Nguyen Ho, just by discerning friend from foe. Along with their general capabilities, he could most quickly select usable individuals from a crowd. Previously, Nguyen Ho had relied on this trick, leading over 1,000 Imperial Guard soldiers to turn the tide in the western capital. Now, he was preparing to use this trick again, repeating the old plan to break the current deadlock. Nguyen Ho, mounted on his horse, looked at the faces surrounding him, his gaze sweeping over each bowed head. Although he had just returned to the capital, he planned to organize several military drills, encompassing all the barracks within the capital city. Prestige and obedience were accumulated bit by bit in this manner. Sometimes it seemed like just a single meeting. A few exchanged words, receiving some praise from others, seemingly having no immediate effect. But at a critical moment, it might just play a crucial role. Like with Zhu Jiako previously. I've finally regained control. It's just that. Nguyen Ho looked at those soldiers. Their expressions still held a trace of unease. Having just gone through such successive upheavals, coupled with the previously lax military discipline, it was naturally impossible to say that Nguyen Ho could immediately turn them into a fighting force just by replacing a group of officers with obedient ones. But at the very least, there wouldn't be a situation where a few shouts from outside the city walls would cause them to directly rebel against Nguyen Ho. At least, if Pei Yuanzhao were to lead a large army here in a few days, Nguyen Ho could stabilize the situation in the western capital city. Nguyen Ho dismounted, and Yuqi Chongwu personally came to take the horse's reins. After dismounting, Nguyen Ho spoke directly to him. I have already dispatched men to Rang County to summon the Flying Cavalry Division, and also summoned the Shield Valiant Battalion from the south. Although these two divisions of D and Man barbarian troops are still considered respectful and obedient, mobilizing them comes at a great cost, and no one knows if any unforeseen incidents will occur. It's best not to fight if we don't have to. At the same time, I have also sent an imperial decree to Pei Yuanzhao, ordering him to halt his advance and quickly enter the capital to report on his duties. Yuqi Chongwu, following closely behind, said, quote, Your Majesty, I fear Pei Yuanzhao will not obey the decree. Nguyen Ho nodded slightly. He also felt that Pei Yuanzhao would probably not comply. However, there was no harm in trying. Perhaps that Pei Yuanzhao would actually enter the capital. If he could be detained in the capital, then many matters would be easier to resolve. Turning his head, Nguyen Ho looked towards Yuqi Chongwu. Whether Pei Yuanzhao obeys the decree or not, or whether the barbarian troops remain respectful and obedient, ultimately, it still depends on whether the Imperial Guard can be stabilized. Nguyen Ho once again examined Yuqi Chongwu's facial features and bone structure. His facial features hadn't changed, but his bone structure had gained an additional aspect. Bone structure: Silver Spear General. Proficient with a silver spear. Capable of achieving high rank with a single spear. Nurturer of 100 subordinates. Skilled in training and selecting soldiers. This physiognomy art, with deeper observation, seemed to provide information that became more accurate and abundant. Nguyen Ho had not yet verified Yuqi Chongwu's ability to lead troops in battle. But hailing from a family of military aristocrats, his father and uncles were all trusted disciples who had followed the late emperor from the Central Plains to this western city region. Regarding troop training, marching, encampment, formations, and chain of command, his foundational knowledge in these areas was extremely solid, as Nguyen Ho had recently witnessed firsthand. With him here, coupled with Nguyen Ho's physiognomy art, this Imperial Guard unit would absolutely not fall into disarray. 5 days later, Nguyen Ho was reviewing official documents behind a screen when a figure appeared outside the door. Bowing low from beyond the tall doorway. Your Majesty, speak. The great general, pillar of the state, has withdrawn to Stone City. These past few days, Nguyen Ho had been appeasing civil officials and taking control of the Imperial Guard internally, while dispatching troops and generals and simultaneously putting pressure on Pei Yuanzhao externally. But by his calculations, the imperial decree should have only just reached Pei Yuanzhao not long ago. How could the news of Pei Yuanzhao withdrawing to Stone City have returned so quickly? Nguyen Ho looked up. Withdrawn the troops? Then where is the great general? Pillar of the state? The eunuch. He has also returned to Stone City. Nguyen Ho. Didn't I say to invite the great general into the capital? Where is the messenger who delivered the decree? The eunuch. He has not yet returned to report. This is news brought by someone sent by the great general. Pillar of the state. Nguyen Ho didn't look at any report. Speak. The eunuch. Pei Yuanzhao submitted a memorial stating that the farmlands are not yet peaceful. Now that Your Majesty's sacred health has recovered, This servant requests to return to guard the border to consolidate the imperial domain. As Nguyen Ho listened, he calculated the timing. It seemed that Nguyen Ho's imperial decree had not yet reached him. Pei Yuanzhao, upon learning that Nguyen Ho had entered the capital with 1,000 men and that Prime Minister Nguyen Hoang had died, immediately began to withdraw his troops. It had to be said, this man was indeed very decisive. It appeared that Pei Yuanzhao was not yet willing to fall out with Nguyen Ho. Furthermore, he also didn't take advantage of Nguyen Hoang's rebellion this time to cause trouble by accusing Nguyen Ho of being a demon or monster. At least at this moment, he still recognized Nguyen Ho as the son of heaven. This wasn't the best news for Nguyen Ho, but it was indeed good news. At least he could temporarily breathe a sigh of relief. How long had he been in this world? Inside and outside the court, every one of these rebellious officials and traitors wanted to put a knife to his neck. This position as son of heaven, although Nguyen Ho wasn't afraid, was truly unsettling. Nguyen Ho slowly relaxed, leaning back against the bed and spreading his arms wide. He recalled once more, back then in the palace, seeing the extravagant and debauched scenes of this son of heaven. Another 2 days passed. Nguyen Ho still hadn't finished the concluding tasks, much less had time to enjoy any extravagance or debauchery. Same place, same position. Another minister sought an audience. Nguyen Ho raised his hand, let him enter. The minister, holding a jade tablet of office, performed the ritual obeisance. After a long while, he finally got to the main point. Your Majesty, something has happened with the Flying Cavalry Division and the Shield Valiant Battalion. Nguyen Ho immediately sat up straight again from his relaxed, outstretched posture, his gaze turning sharp once more. What is it? A voice came from outside. They complain the rewards are too little. These barbarian troops refuse to return, saying they must enter the western capital to claim their rewards. Nguyen Ho rubbed his temples, really wanting to curse loudly at these insolent, unruly soldiers, then mount his horse, gird his sword, and led a large army to slaughter them all. In the end, he still said, "Granted. Damn dogs. Sooner or later, I'll kill them all." Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Tai Feel Good Cultivation Audio Channel Chapter Tam Early Morning. The Hall of Death was the bedchamber, but Nguyen Ho had recently taken to staying in its heated chamber to handle state affairs and read memorials. He, this demon, was even more diligent than the true Son of Heaven. During the day, he met with high-ranking officials in the outer hall, and at night, he rested inside the hall. Nguyen Ho sat high above, while below, the officials knelt on both sides, taking turns to step forward to report or raise issues. Quote, "Your servant believes the urgent matter is still the selection of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is the head of all officials, his appointment must be announced. Your Majesty, your servant wishes to recommend someone." Early in the morning, these high-ranking officials of the nation argued precisely about the position of Prime Minister. Everyone coveted this position. They argued for the entire morning, discussing nothing else, and accomplishing nothing. Meanwhile, Nguyen Ho sat high above, watching them argue, and used the opportunity to familiarize himself with everyone in the court. Midday, Nguyen Ho returned from the front hall to the heated chamber. A palace maid slid open the door, and eunuchs followed in procession. Light pierced through the paper-pasted window, illuminating the table. Nguyen Ho flipped through a memorial, picked up a brush, and pondered for a long while. "Your Majesty." Hearing the voice, Nguyen Ho turned his head to look. A woman with exquisite makeup and her hair in a high bun entered the hall. She immediately knelt at his side. "Why have you come here?" Nguyen Ho looked down at her, and she looked up. Thus, Nguyen Ho could clearly see her bright eyes, high, straight nose, and plump red lips. It was somewhat amusing to say. Nguyen Ho didn't even know her name. "Stand up." The beauty came forward, sat to one side, and carefully ground ink. She also seemed to notice the melancholy on Nguyen Ho's face. "Is your Majesty troubled by matters of state?" Nguyen Ho nodded slightly, saying nothing. Nguyen Ho held the document in his hand, and with the other, dipped the brush into the inkstone. Finally, He drew a large cross on it, then tossed the brush aside. Nguyen Ho wasn't troubled by matters of state. What troubled him was that he didn't know how to write. To be precise, he didn't know how to use a brush. Before becoming emperor, he felt anyone could do it. But once Nguyen Ho sat in this position, he felt nothing was right, problems were everywhere. It seemed that he, a demon occupying the Son of Heaven's body, would sooner or later be exposed. This wasn't a matter of patching the east wall while the west wall crumbled, with winds blowing from all directions impossible to block. Rather, from the very beginning, this wasn't a room at all, but a sieve. At this very moment, the beauty watched Nguyen Ho draw that crude cross. Your Majesty's calligraphy. Nguyen Ho. What about it? The beauty. The strokes are like dragons soaring and phoenixes dancing. Truly majestic and powerful. Nguyen Ho smiled. Exposed or not, when your position is high enough and your power strong enough, it seemed it no longer mattered. When Nguyen Ho tossed the brush aside, everyone around was terrified. The head eunuch led the way in kneeling, and the other eunuchs and palace maids followed suit. In an instant, an atmosphere of trepidation and anxiety spread through the grand hall. It wasn't until the concubine said, "Truly majestic and powerful," and Nguyen Ho smiled, that the uneasy atmosphere subsided. Nguyen Ho, bring me the brush. The eunuch presented the brush, holding it high above his head. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. If anyone has angered your Majesty, this servant will immediately have that disrespectful person arrested. Nguyen Ho waved his hand, dismissing him. The eunuch glanced at the concubine, seeming to understand something. Yes. This servant takes his leave. Afterward, Nguyen Ho reviewed the official documents and memorials. If he approved, he marked it with a circle. If not, he marked it with a cross. Of course, these documents and memorials would not be directly issued. They would have to be discussed again in person later. The concubine ground ink and served tea. With her soft, fragrant presence nearby, time passed much more quickly than when that eunuch with his strange manner of speaking was bustling about. Nguyen Ho reviewed memorials for half a day and yawned. It was gradually getting dark. The night wind was a bit chilly. The concubine draped a purplish gold cloak over Nguyen Ho and whispered in his ear, "Your Majesty, it is getting late." After speaking, her face flushed red. Her expression held 7 parts shyness and 3 parts anticipation. "Will you be visiting my chambers tonight?" There was no cold palace in the imperial city. At least no palace bore that name. But there were similar places. A secluded small courtyard. Upon entering the gate was a corridor. And tall, ancient banyan trees obscured the moonlight. Deep within the small courtyard, lamps and torches burned brightly. A woman of devastating beauty sat on the bed, an ancient bronze mirror placed beside her. In the room, only one serving maid attended her. Outside the door, a young attendant of about 12 or 13 years old stood guard, holding a lantern. Judging by her appearance, she was Consort Su Chin from the harem, the one who had previously been boating with the Son of Heaven on the lake in the imperial garden. After the Son of Heaven fell into the water, although he said nothing concerning her, nor did he blame her, but unknowingly, she had ended up in this place. And Nguyen Ho, recently, had been truly very busy. Busy distinguishing loyal from treacherous. Busy fighting with the rebellious officials and traitors within and outside the court. And battling demons and monsters from heaven and earth. He himself was still unfamiliar with everything surrounding the Son of Heaven. How could he remember such a woman in the harem? Cough, 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 cough. The woman, wearing a thin robe, lifted the silk curtain of her bed and looked at the palace maid brewing medicine outside. The palace maid heard the movement and turned her head. "Your ladyship, it's almost ready." Imperial concubine Sus beauty surpassed that of the other concubine by a degree. Only her figure was somewhat inferior. However, in the customs of that era, a curvaceous figure was not yet mainstream. Therefore, her slender, willow-like figure, at this moment, seemed to surpass even her beauty by a degree. Being so, how could she not be envied and hated by others? Imperial concubine Su was not asking about the medicine. Her pale face looked outside. She knew the Son of Heaven had returned to the capital from his hunt. And so she opened her mouth to ask, "Where is His Majesty? Where has His Majesty gone? Why hasn't His Majesty come yet? Could it be that he has forgotten me?" The palace maid stood up and hurriedly said, "Recently, we haven't been allowed to go out. This servant doesn't know what it's like outside now. Wait until tomorrow. This servant will find a way to go out and inquire a little." Imperial concubine Su took the bowl of medicine the palace maid offered, opened her mouth to take a sip, still uneasy, and asked, "Go, ask him a little. He might know." The eunuch was called in. At first, he hesitated, looking left and right, speaking evasively, but under Imperial concubine Su's urging, he finally spoke the truth. "This servant heard that His Majesty has gone to Consort Li's place." In an instant, the look in Imperial concubine Su's eyes changed. Her hand gripped the bedframe tightly, her fingernails pressing as if to dig deep into the wood. Her greatest enemy in her current predicament was that Consort Li. She had always hoped that the Son of Heaven, upon learning of her situation, would come to rescue her. Now, she heard that the Son of Heaven didn't remember her at all, but instead only remembered her enemy. Cough, 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 cough. The willow's slender woman, her face pale, due to anxiety, spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood, mixed with the medicine she had just drunk. It immediately sprayed onto the mirror. Then her body went limp, and she collapsed beside the bed. Blood stained her lips red. Her eyes carried resentment. The concubine looked at her reflection in the nearby mirror, but seemed to vaguely see a scene of a man and woman making love in another palace. Clang! At this moment, the bronze mirror emitted a humming sound, and the image in the mirror suddenly rippled. The palace maid and the eunuch immediately panicked and rushed forward. Your ladyship, what's wrong?" No one saw a disheveled figure appear in the bronze mirror. That figure in the mirror slowly moved away, passing through the door, heading towards Consort Li's palace courtyard. And at this very moment, if someone were to turn the bronze mirror around and lift the curtain covering its back, they would discover that the back of the bronze mirror was engraved with demonic and divine script. It was supported by a wooden stand shaped like the character Jing. Well, and in the center of the wooden stand was embedded a wooden idol. That idol had a long face, like that of a horse. Chapter Chin in the night. Nguyen Ho sat in the imperial palanquin, traversing the imperial road within the palace. On both sides of the wide imperial road were dense, sturdy red pillars, hung full of large, bucket-sized palace lanterns. Nguyen Ho leaned back in the imperial palanquin, adjusting to the slight swaying, his mind pondering the tangled political situation, unsure where to begin unraveling it. Roar! Suddenly, a tiger's roar echoed from within his body. Nguyen Ho knew this was the other, or more accurately, his own instinct warning him that something unusual had appeared in his vicinity. Nguyen Ho lifted the curtain and looked in one direction. Under the moonlight, the layered eaves resembled overlapping mountain ranges, reaching towards the high heavens to touch the moon. Each beast on the ridgelines high above seemed to be raising its head, roaring at the sky. Nguyen Ho pointed into the distance. "What place is that over there?" That place was on the edge of the imperial city, near the treasury and the stables. Even someone unfamiliar with the imperial city would know from its location that it wasn't a particularly favorable place. The eunuch beside him glanced over and immediately replied, "That is Yiding Palace." Nguyen Ho asked again, "Who resides there?" The eunuch immediately said, "Your Majesty. That is where the female servants live." Nguyen Ho didn't ask who Consort Su was, only saying, "Go there." The eunuch was startled for a moment, then immediately said, "Your Majesty, didn't we just say we were going to Consort Li's place? Moreover, that place is where the lowly female servants reside. Your Majesty's esteemed person." Nguyen Ho glanced at him, his expression unchanging as he stated, "This is the second time for you." Saying it was the second time meant that this was only the second instance Nguyen Ho had instructed him to do something, and he dared to question the reason. The eunuch immediately felt his heart leap into his throat. So terrified his soul seemed to fly away. as if he were floating high above, looking down at himself. He didn't deliberately kneel. His entire body went limp and collapsed to the ground. His lips trembled, unable to utter a single word. At this very moment, at this precise instant, Nguyen Ho exuded such an imposing aura and killing intent. Nguyen Ho didn't wait for him to recover his wits. Immediately pointing to a middle-aged eunuch standing among the crowd. "You, come here and lead the way. Hurry." Nguyen Ho was also generous, giving him a chance. Nguyen Ho was also strict, he wouldn't say it 3 times. The eunuch only had that one chance. That eunuch immediately stepped forward, obscuring the figure kneeling on the ground, his 2 arms carrying lanterns. His body bent so low he almost seemed to stick to the ground as he walked. "Yes, Your Majesty." Nguyen Ho closed the curtain, once again concealing himself within the deep, unknown, and mysterious confines of the imperial palanquin. And the young eunuch who had been serving Nguyen Ho since the previous old eunuch passed away was now kneeling on the ground, motionless. The imperial palanquin and its retinue of guards swept past him. Not a single person gave him a second glance. One moment he was on cloud 9, ordering everyone around. The next, he was nothing. Life and death, honor and disgrace, all depended on a single thought of the Son of Heaven. Row upon row of lanterns illuminated the path ahead. In the darkness, figures were indistinct. Only the advancing lanterns could be seen. Without Nguyen Ho needing to urge them further, everyone quickened their pace, heading towards Yiding Palace. Faster, faster, everyone, keep up. After a short while, they rapidly approached the location where Nguyen Ho had previously sensed the anomaly. But they hadn't reached the destination yet when Nguyen Ho suddenly spoke. "Stop." This time, no one questioned why. Everyone quickly came to a halt, silently standing in place, awaiting the Son of Heaven's next command. Nguyen Ho did not lift the curtain, nor did he look outside. His voice emanated from within the imperial palanquin. "What place is to the left?" This time, the one who answered was the middle-aged eunuch Nguyen Ho had just chosen. "That is Dizan Courtyard. Su Jiaoyi is currently residing there." The middle-aged eunuch added a bit more information that Nguyen Ho was unaware of. Or rather, that someone didn't want him to know. Quote, "A few days ago, Su Jiaoyi accompanied Your Majesty on a boating excursion in the Imperial Garden, and afterwards was arranged to stay in this Dizan Courtyard. It has been some time." Nguyen Ho didn't know who Su Jiaoyi was, but hearing the other party's words, he immediately figured it out. However, Nguyen Ho still didn't understand why the tiger within him sensed that something was amiss here. But, no matter what this thing intended to do, Nguyen Ho had to prevent it. The imperial palanquin had just arrived before the courtyard. Immediately, a group of people rushed from the surroundings to pay their respects. The initially deserted courtyard instantly became lively. Nguyen Ho alighted from the palanquin and walked inside. At this moment, a young eunuch rushed out from the courtyard. He seemed to want to say something to halt Nguyen Ho's steps. But Nguyen Ho shouted, "Get lost!" The eunuch felt a wave of mental disorientation and couldn't stop him in time. Nguyen Ho had already pushed open the door and entered. Nguyen Ho went in to investigate and saw the scene that the eunuch had just tried to prevent him from seeing. The ground was covered with red candles. Wax from each candle dripped onto the floor, like teardrops, and a disheveled woman, wearing a thin robe, was surrounded by that circle of red candles. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, directly opposite her, an ancient, exquisitely crafted bronze mirror was placed. Let alone Nguyen Ho, even others who came upon this scene would almost immediately understand what was happening. This is evil sorcery? Remnants of the Hell Dao? Or minions planted by the Prime Minister beforehand? The eunuch who had been guarding outside also followed him in. Knowing the matter was exposed and beyond saving, a sinister glint flashed in his eyes, and he actually lunged straight at Nguyen Ho. Audacious, seize him, but by now, someone had already approached him. Before he could get close, the guards on either side struck. One blade pierced his abdomen from the front, emerging from his back, while another was pressed against his neck. His eyes widened, and he finally collapsed to the ground. And at this very moment, Nguyen Ho walked towards the bronze mirror. He could sense that this object was the source. He slowly advanced, carefully examining the bronze mirror. In the mirror, what was reflected was not his own image, but Su Zhaoyi, dressed in a thin white robe, walking around in a dim, obscure space. Nguyen Ho opened his mouth and called out, "Su Zhaoyi, return," and the other party seemed to genuinely hear his voice. Turning around in a daze, "Your Majesty?" Suddenly, the bronze mirror radiated light, beams like arrows shooting towards Nguyen Ho. At this moment, the Tran Fach 100 Battles saber technique that Nguyen Ho had previously acquired came into play. Faced with the danger, Nguyen Ho reflexively drew the Son of Heaven's sword from his waist, using the sword like a saber to slash down at the bronze mirror. Bang! Although the bronze mirror was exquisitely crafted, its material was not considered particularly sturdy. Especially this strike from Nguyen Ho, which was both precise and vicious, concentrating all his body's strength into a single point. In an instant, the bronze mirror was sent flying, shattering into pieces. The stand supporting it also disintegrated, and the demonic idol inlaid on the back of the mirror fell to the ground. And in another place, a disheveled shadow rushed to the door of Consort Li's bedchamber. Just about to step inside, hearing a call, it turned its head. Then, an extremely powerful force sucked at her, pulling her relentlessly backward. However, the shadow had left the body. It was now being dragged back at 100 times the speed. Dizin courtyard. A fierce gust of wind arose, and all the candles were extinguished in an instant. And on the ground, the beauty surrounded by red candles, who had looked as if she were about to stop breathing. At this moment, her pale complexion finally regained a trace of rosiness, and her breathing gradually warmed. In the darkness, Nguyen Ho sheathed his sword with incredible precision, his movements fluid and practiced as if performed thousands of times. Nguyen Ho summoned the imperial physician. Nguyen Ho walked towards the chaotic ground, picking up the demonic idol from the floor. Although he had never seen it before, Nguyen Ho still uttered, "Lord Ma?" You have just finished listening to episode high of the audiobook, Demon Emperor, at Feel Good Cultivation audio channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get the latest updates. Thank you so much.